Okay, so, I'm here for the daunting task of summing up, and I brought my notebook, and I'm glad I brought it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about water and time, because Bill Fox was talking about that, and I'm glad that I discovered his writing here, because he's a surprisingly elegant writer for an art functionary. His books are really, good. But, even though I'm a literateur myself, I usually don't take refuge in kind of watery literary metaphors like that, or at least I didn't until a thunderstorm blew out our microphones on our panel here. And although I'm not a superstitious guy, sometimes it's good to take a hint. So, what about water or the absence of water? Well, I noticed people were doing a lot of emotional leveling about the difficulties of the environment here. So I want to tell you that I came here from Austin, which is my hometown, where we're having the hottest, driest summer in our history, a historical drought, as they call it. And the absence of water is very, very evident. We're like the new Marfa in Austin now. Climate change has lost all its sci-fi tinge in my lifetime and is now a melancholy and even tiresome reality where I came from, and the land is just blistered in a flame. I went out, I took pictures of the massive wildfire in Bastrop, which was visible from the capital of Texas 30 miles away, and their plumes of smoke were blowing out into the Gulf of Mexico. It's a huge disaster. We had fires the size of Massachusetts chewing up, Texas. Although I'm not an art photographer, I took some comfort in going out there and bearing witness to this thing and trying to come to terms with the scarifying emotional realities of something very obvious to futurists and keenly obvious to many sci-fi writers. I've been writing for 30 years. There hasn't been a year when I haven't written about climate change. It's one of the most obvious things to predict. It's not really something to speculate about, although I plan to speculate in this speech. It's just kind of a blunt reality that the fossil fuel enterprise has done a regulatory capture of the entire planet, and we're involved in a war for oil, and it's the curse of oil, and it's a war for a curse that's endless and happening. It gets boring running around being Cassandra. Starting Earth Day 1970 was a pretty late start considering the scope of this multi-century problem. That's, it's something that will shadow me the rest of my life like that cloud does. I will pass the rest of my lifetime under the shadow of climate change. It's not about warning people in 2011 or trying to avert or diffuse some misfortune. The wolf is beyond the door. The wolf is in the living room. This is the Anthropocenic condition. This is how we live. This is the force majeure. It's here. It's very obvious. I don't want to waste into the audience's time on American domestic politics, although we've heard a lot of it at this event. We're demonstrating American bewilderment and the breakdown of the Washington Consensus. Came apart 10 years ago. It's not news to anybody outside the USA. I mean, sure, Americans could have done better in tackling this problem, but really, this, nexus that we have, this kind of tangle of national shame and pride is a big part of the world's problem. It's like a dysfunctional family that blames everything on dad's alcohol problem. We haven't achieved sustainability because, half our population thinks it's impossible and the other half does, and wants to work it through from the aspect of a nation state, and the nation state is not sustainable. It's not sustainable. Nation states are just social historical artifacts. They date back to the 17th century. They're not part of the natural landscape. My father-in-law had 8 different national passports in his 8-decade lifetime. He never left his house. He lived in the Balkans, and nation states just reformulated themselves around him. There are no national forests. You cannot protect a forest with a nation. There are forests that protect nations. There aren't any nations that have forests. You know, the global climate crisis is a climate crisis, and it's global because the globe is an externality. Don't pollute you, don't pollute me, pollute that fellow behind the tree. You just throw it in the atmosphere, because the atmosphere is somebody else's problem, and what goes around comes around, and that's how we ended up in this predicament. And we don't have a way out of it. We don't really see one, and it's, you know, it's worsening, and that's our situation. You know, there are many pro-fossil fuel enterprises in the world, very active, heavily armed, a lot of money. Anybody who has an empty gas tank at the side of a road in Nevada is a pro-fossil fuel guy. Of course we want it. We all want it. But, you know, the thing that encourages me, or sort of offers daylight there, is that there's no pro-climate crisis party. There's no government that actually likes the idea of wrecking the climate. It doesn't really benefit anybody. It really is an externality and something that's just entropic. And, you know, it's here, and I know I'm going to have to live with it, and, you know, I brought you this burden. It is my emotional burden. It's something I've known about for decades. I was happy that you were here. I'm happy to unburden myself about it. But on another level, you know, even if we were a planetary Denmark, climate change would still be a problem. It's something we inherited from our grandfathers and great-grandfathers. We have other major crises that would be on our minds if the climate was perfectly stable. There's water loss, population growth, toxins in the food chain, ocean acidification, mass extinction problems, atomic weapons, and that isn't even moving into the sci-fi realm of singularities, nanotech gray goo, killer robots, asteroids, sci-fi catastrophes, sun blowing up. You know, I've got a million of these. I am a science fiction writer. They don't frighten me. They're just grist for the mill. Some are closer to us than others. Some are more speculative than others, but they're all there, and they're just part of the contemporary condition. And, you know, there are aspects of the contemporary condition I find encouraging, and one of them is this building. I'm really happy to be in a new museum with a new program, because I spend a lot of time in museums, surprising amounts, really, for a futurist. And, you know, I spent a lot of time in Europe where, you know, you find people routinely trying to stuff culture into post-industrialized spaces. It's what they call the stuffed animal. You got your basic dead, you know, Italian car plant, and somebody's in there trying to drag in tourists by repurposing the thing. Commonly they leave the skin on it and then they stick the whole thing in. You know, this isn't one of those. This is actually a contemporary 21st century space, and, you know, disciplinary silos are breaking down inside places like this. They're actually kind of shattering. You can hear them break. There's weird, eerie, hybrid mashups of art, engineering, architecture, industrial design, interface design, music, remediation, archaeology, public policy, and social networking, and they're all in the room right now. Just all of them. You know, and I like to tie it up with sort of, you know, overarching literary metaphors like water and water flowing and water and time and so forth. But, you know, I must say that it actually feels very personally cozy in this room. I don't feel any particular cognitive dissonance. We're all strangers here. On the contrary, it feels kind of like a city council meeting. Where, you know, there are stakeholders who represent various interests, but, you know, it's quite a lively community of people who, really want to pull their own weight, you know, and they're, up there with the microphone, trying to make it happen, you know. They're trying to get it across. It's a good place for trend spotting, you know, and I do a lot of that. You know, and indeed for, you know, in many ways for somebody like myself who really does sort of like to watch the river of time flowing by and so forth, you know, it's kind of an ideal gig. It's just kind of a nice survey of you know, an unexpected set of stakeholders. And I like to watch where it starts and where it goes and where the twists and the oxbows are and how it all ends. And, you know, as a futurist, I'm very keen on novelties, but as an artist, I'm very keen on disappearances, things going. I mean, I'm fiercely interested in the digital revolution. This is something that happened in my lifetime. If you're interested in science, art, architecture, design, it was an impossible thing not to watch. It's been quite wonderful. You know, it's a fantastic revolution, easily as powerful as the now dead space age or the tragically curtailed and weird atomic age or the industrial age. It's been really a privilege to see it, but it also cost me losses that should be frankly acknowledged. Like the things I loved best in my youth were paperback genre books and vinyl records of off-the-wall subculture music. And those are as dead as, shellac cylindrical 78s now. They're as dead as the fax machine or the mimeograph. And, my romance with the new cost me those things. They're gone. They're gone in the way that, like, the city's environment of Austin, Texas is gone. The Texas of my grandfathers is visibly going. I was driving across the state for a month during our record-setting heat and drought, and you could see the dead trees, some of them decades old, waiting to be consumed by fire. They're brown, they're leafless, they're flammable, they're not coming back. I mean, even though the city of Austin is full of sympathetic greens like myself and is the only fully green-powered city council in the USA, they're flammable. And I'm keenly aware of it. I'm a journalist. If you're a journalist, the people who pay you and want to hear from you are entities like Time, Life, and Fortune. You would not see publications called Entropy, Death, Collapse. Commerce is always a vulgar huckster, but, art is a different matter. They can acknowledge these things, come to terms with them. Events of the new magazines and art doesn't have to lie about the scope of the loss or what's happening to us. And we do suffer losses. In another and kinder world, landscape art people, art and enviro crowd like yourself would be happy gardeners. You'd be like, flower arrangers with ikebana scissors. That would be your role in society. But in this society, in the Anthropocene, you're triage people. You're remediation experts, you're emergency rescue. You got hard hats, knee pads, multi-tools. That's your fate. It could have been otherwise, but that's not what it is. So, what comes next? Well, people always ask me this. I'm a futurist science fiction writer. And I think I could sum up your event here by speculating about it, by extrapolating about it, and by kind of drawing a caricature of the attitudes that I've seen here, kind of small things, from which mighty oaks will grow. What comes after the Anthropocene? Well, the Anthropocene is coming. People are going to get their heads around it. They're going to realize that nature's over. We're in next nature, and there's no way back. And so a lot of the attitudes that were built around that are just going to die of physical realities. But in a way, the Anthropocene is going to connect us, I think, to the Pleistocene. We're going to see a lot of sort of meta-historical revisionism where we try to get our heads around the gravity of the transition that's actually occurred to us. And one of the most interesting things about the Pleistocene is that it was the last time there was a really massive die-off of species. There were giant animals all over the American West, and go out to the La Brea tar pits. There's sort of huge capybaras and meat-eating sloths, gigantic meat on the hoof that all died mysteriously at about the same time that human beings arrived in North America. And in fact, it's kind of a massive die-off about the time that the glaciers go and humans start getting it about things like bows. And I think we're going to find out that the Anthropocene, or we're going to convince ourselves that the Anthropocene actually dates back to the Pleistocene. That, in fact, as soon as we arrived, before we were literate, we started transforming the planet. And once we start looking for evidence of that, it's going to be all over the place. And then a lot of the problems that sort of bother us most are going to be redefined as their problems by the coming generation, who, the sort of indignados, the sort of young crowd who've been written out of capitalism and are out in the streets all over the place inventing their own lives and careers and finding no jobs. And sort of creating a post-political baby boomer paradigm. These people are being alienated even as we speak, and they're going to be the ones who bury us, so they're going to be the ones who sort of redefine. They're going to find their own way of approaching this, and it's going to be very anti-baby boomer because they don't really have much reason for gratitude there. People are going to get over talking about consumerism. There's sort of a lot of ritual condemnations of consumerism. Here it's gone, okay? There's no middle class. There is no mass consumption. It's an old-fashioned problem. It's a luxury problem. There's nobody there to do that for you. It's an old person's idea of a problem. The prosperity machine broke years ago. It's not coming back. What we have are ultra-wealthy, imperiled speculators too big to fail who have all the money. Okay, that's not consumerism. That's like a Gothic and aristocratic kind of society. It's not the kind we're used to condemning and being upset about. There was a former green ideology, which is sort of all based around modesty, simplicity, Thoreauvian, organic, arts and craftsy, rootsy, burlap, very connected to materiality, non-alienated and so forth. It's dying as we speak. It has been replaced and subverted by digital life, just like everything else. And we have a new kind of bright green lifestyle. It's all about a dematerialized lifestyle, despatialized, detemporalized, a maker scene, social network scene. It can't be stopped. There is no group anywhere. Even the Al-Qaeda refuseniks are taken in by this. Of course, the low-HOS crowd, lifestyles of health and sustainability, are going to be digitalized, low-HOS. And it's going to be all about removing materiality and substituting apps wherever possible. It's here already. It's in your purse, okay? It's in your pocket. There's no way back. You're not going to get there from here. Urban informatics, there was a little bit of talking about that. Digitized cities, this is a strong coming trend, and it's going to lead to wilderness informatics. People think, okay, well, you know, it's all centered around this stuff. No, it actually is going to migrate out to the countryside. We're going to have digitized water systems where we sort of really watch the water because it becomes precious and it's like cheap to look at it. Instead of install video cams on it, watch every little creek and, you know, drip. But we can also track animals. We've been doing that for decades now. It never occurred to anybody to just sort of like actually watch the bison like on Facebook in real time. If you have them tracked, you can let them into the cities. You can have urban farming, but there's no reason you can't have urban wilderness animals. You don't have to shoot them. You don't have to fence them. They're just going to like walk in on video cams and walk out like any other kind of tourist. Wilderness is leaving. There isn't any. People say, well, we shouldn't call it wilderness. It's never been wilderness. Okay, that's kind of a hypnotic, rhetorical move. It's not that it's never been there. It's that there's a new kind. The abandoned areas, the involuntary parks, the uninsurable areas, the areas where development cannot commercially take place, the disinvested areas, the gray lands, the dumps, the Chernobyls, the areas returned to nature where there is no nature, the ghost towns of mining, the dead suburbs, the unsustainable. The ruins of the unsustainable are the 21st century's frontier. That's what your real issue is going to be, not protecting what's left of the wilderness because climate change is going to claim that. Your real problem is like what happens when stuff reverts to next nature. Not reverts to nature, but reverts to next nature, the sort of unnatural, anthropocenic, abandoned area. That's really the 21st century's big organizational problem. And it's like super good for land art because it's already developed. It doesn't have any shibboleths about its being perfect. It's just over for anything but the kind of purposes that you would have. We're going to see geolocative land art, sort of lat long. You could spot any spot on the planet's surface. Got a map down to the centimeter now. It really changes your relationship with the landscape. You can't get lost in the wilderness. There is no lost to get lost in. Young people growing up today will not know what lost is. They all have satellite locators in their purses and pockets. And you can do very unusual things if you know exactly where things are on the planet's surface to a centimeter scale. That's happening right now. We're going to see robotics in land art, not clanking RoboCop robotics, but like drone land art, autonomous scanning, flying, mapping, looking machines. Lots of them. They're cheap. Tremendous amounts of military effort are being devoted into this. It always blows back into civilian life. You're going to find it easy to repurpose this. You're going to see microbes in land art because we're doing a heck of a lot of work on small-scale technology and genetics. The interior of the human body is like the last real jungle. There's thousands and thousands of undiscovered species in there, in people. And we don't have any idea what they're up to. It's like the gastrointestinal tract is like the next Amazon. We ignore it because we didn't have any way to get to, it's troublesome and expensive to go in and just gene splice everything that's in your own body and just sort of figure out what's living on you and in you. But it's one of the most interesting topics you could possibly have. The commercial and military implications are obvious for a thing like that. Not to mention what it would mean to the management of natural life if you can control and study the flow of microbes. I mean, the microbial level, most biomass is microbes, really, by weight. That's where all the action is, in decomposition and fixing carbon and so forth and so on. We don't know anything more about it than like people in the 19th century knew about the Mato Grosso or the sources of the Nile, but it's like coming online really fast. It's something you could do in an atelier. The tools to do it are getting cheaper. It's on its way. Another major issue, invasives. In a world of the Anthropocenic, obviously it's the planet of weeds scenario. Stuff is retreating as the ice melts, as the rivers fail to feed it, as the climate becomes destabilized. Well, we've got a lot of plants and animals that are keen to flourish under destabilized conditions, and they're all called weeds. And they're our friends if we want them. They're the, how could I put this? They're the victory condition for an Anthropocenic. So I think they're going to get a lot of attention. And instead of being, treated as hate objects, as they were for good reasons when we thought we could repel them, they're going to be enlisted, really. Because if we don't do something about them, fire ants and kudzu are possibly worse than human beings when it comes to wreaking environmental havoc. Even if we all went indoors and just adapted the lotus position, North America would be torn apart by kudzu and fire ants. Fire ants, they're all one family. They're giant clone. They probably outweigh us by now. And they're all over the continent. We got to do something with them. I don't know what, but I think fire ant fine art. If we could domesticate fire ants, if we just sort of had their number and we could make them do what we want, they'd be our best pals, those little guys are like bulldozers, really. There's no stopping them. They're an amazing phenomenon, and fame awaits the person to tame fire ants, or kudzu, I think. And that's a melancholy and kind of very Gothic thing to say. It's like, well, they're there. We got to do something with them. They're all over the place. It's like we got to stop treating them as enemies and something like bring them inside the Anthropocenic tent, the Formicenic. They're sharing the planet with us, and they're a species, and really the ultimate human relationship to the landscape, is to be buried in it. That's the truth. It's a fact. It's the fact of the human mortal condition. It's hard to be all perky about it. But, it's a matter of perspective, really. And it's something that the arts can do and literature can do, or that other lines of work are just sherry to go to. Speaking of the river water time. Okay, I'm a novelist. It was like the most famous novel in my line of work, right? Huckleberry Finn. Okay, it's all about time, the river, change, etc. Okay, what's Huckleberry Finn about? Huckleberry Finn is a novel which is about a semi-literate, underclass juvenile delinquent from a dysfunctional alcoholic family with substance abuse problems, and his sidekick, who is an undocumented border-crossing refugee engaged in human smuggling. That's Huckleberry Finn. That's the great American novel. They're on the river. And a civil war is coming that's going to tear the nation apart in a bloody catastrophe. And it's a kid's book. People read that for amusement. That's the river of human life, you know. That's what it's like. It's good to recognize these things, to come to terms with them, not to try to cling to eternal life like the ancient Egyptians, mummified in older attitudes. You never step in the same river twice. It's good to be engaged with the river, aware that it's a river, that it has the characteristics of one. Art can wake us up, can make us do that. It's the antidote to our freezing up inside, retreating into a desiccated dogma that flows. You know, during my lifetime, I've seen art derided as a kind of varnish on barbarism. There's nothing commoner for this. American artists have a very difficult matter. In this way, I am an American artist. I'm a novelist. I travel a lot. I like to write visionary novels. I hang out with the art scene. There was nothing commoner for me, instead of my 20s and 30s, to be overseas somewhere and have somebody kind of challenge me on this. It's like, oh, you write American novels, don't you? Yes, I do. Well, aren't you like a card-carrying agent of massive corporate publishers and the American consumer, military, and entertainment imperialists? Aren't they just commodifying your dissent? I don't hear that anymore. I don't even kind of hear that anymore. And I'm really, really glad it's gone. It means that art really matters, and in a new and exciting way. Not the old way, a really new way. An event like this is like a long, refreshing drink of reclaimed sewage water. It truly made me glad I'm alive in this space and this time. Thank you for your attention.